Good evening, everyone. Today is October 13th. Friday, October 13th, which is why I'm doing this. I thought it was a pretty good day to start thinking about Halloween, getting into the holiday spirit, and making a video, the first video for the season. So I bought a couple of props to get myself psyched up. I got this. Yeah, see the resemblance? Remind you of anybody you know? And I also bought this. I got these at the dollar store, right? So here we go. Is that cute? I don't know why I'm obsessed with skeletons. I think I'm worried about my weight and getting fat. So anyway, so happy Halloween, folks. This is where it all begins. Now, so what I like to do is do an imitation of a couple of my friends who have been making lists. My friend James and my friend Ian, they both made lists of their top vampire films. Ian did a top 10 list. James did one top 13, just for the number 13, I guess, because it sounds creepy. So I think I'll do a top 13 list. By the way, let's all welcome Ian back, formerly known as Forkerball. He is now known as The Old Stuff is Better. So I'll try to remember to put a link down to his new channel so you can welcome Ian back to YouTube. So anyway, so my top 13 films, vampire films, and I own most of the ones I'm going to talk about except for one. So starting off at number 13, this Iranian film, sort of Iranian-American, A Girl Walks Home Alone at Midnight in beautiful black and white. This is from the year 2011, and it was the debut film for this director, whose name I can't pronounce. Really impressive and interesting take on the whole vampire concept. It's in the Persian language with subtitles, and great imagery in this movie. And some of it's pretty violent and scary and bloody, but actually very impressive. I bought this, still haven't watched the DVD yet, but I saw the movie on the big screen maybe 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago or something like that, and just was really blown away by it. So, all right. Coming in at number 12, this is a double feature film from Midnight Movies. One film is called The Vampire. The other is called The Return of Dracula, and that's the one I have on my list. From 1958, it's a modern take on the vampire legend where Dracula is emigrating to the United States from Eastern Europe to get fresh blood, I suppose. Played by Francis Lederer, who was a great Czechoslovakian actor with a great accent, very Lugosi-like. Not in his appearance, but he has kind of that dark Eastern European look about him, and it's not a bad movie. It's very low budget, and it's only 77 minutes long, but it's actually not bad. I always liked this. They used to play this incessantly back in the 1960s and 70s on TV, and I really fell in love with it. So, okay. And then starting off with the Hammer films, the 1958 Horror of Dracula, known in the UK only as Dracula. It's a remake of the original film starring Christopher Lee, Peter Cushing, and it's wonderful. I mean, just everything about it is wonderful. Christopher Lee put his mark on the vampire legend, and he's second only to Mr. Lugosi as a great image of a vampire. Continuing with the Hammer films, one that I like even better than Horror of Dracula is its sequel, Brides of Dracula, from 1960. Peter Cushing is back. Christopher Lee did not want to play in this film, so they got another actor, a guy named David Peel, who was actually, he doesn't play Dracula, but he plays a very good vampire. And the interesting concept in this seems to be that people become vampires because of dissolute living. The mother of the character, the vampire character, played by actress Martita Hunt, she's talking about how the guy went away to school and he got involved in activities with the wrong kind of crowd. Maybe he got involved in a vampire cult. Obviously, he became a vampire somehow, but I always liked this film. A lot of good atmosphere. Moving on to Dracula's Daughter from the year 1936, starring Gloria Holden, the first sequel from Universal Pictures of the original Dracula, and it's very understated and very impressive. It's not a violent film, but it just has some very intense and creepy scenes. The scene where Countess Maria Zaleska seduces this young girl, I mean, not sexually, although there's been a lot of there's been a lot of speculation over the decades about whether it was a sexual seduction, but it's still very intense to this day. And yeah, and also on the double bill is, as an honorable mention, I'll make a tie here. The Lon Chaney version of Dracula, the Son of Dracula from 1943, also from Universal Pictures, which is a movie that I've loved all my life. So even though Lon Chaney did not do a great job as Dracula, it's still a very impressive film. It has a lot of great atmosphere. From 1944, this is Bela Lugosi doing another vampire, very much like Dracula, in The Return of the Vampire. He plays a character named Armand Tesla, who looks like Dracula, sounds like Dracula, wears a cape, and there's also a werewolf in this film. He's the slave slash servant of the vampire, and very good. It's a low budget film from Columbia Pictures, and yeah, very good movie. Good chance to see Bela Lugosi in top form. Then we have the original silent version of Nosferatu, starring the incredible Max Schreck, and I think that's why I like this movie so much, because Max Schreck, I mean, there's just nobody in the world like Max Schreck, and I don't know. I love this movie. I have a lot of reverence for it, but I also happen to love the 1979 remake starring Klaus Kinski as Nosferatu. I'm losing my mind here. Yes, the 1979 remake is a movie that I've only seen a couple of times. The last time I saw it was about 2 or 3 years ago, again on the big screen, and it is always a very intense experience. It's not a movie that I own. I'm not sure that I want to own it. It's not that easy to watch. So I guess I will just kind of leave it there. But I have a lot of respect for the movie, and it's very, very well done. Okay. The next up is the Danish film Vampyr, or do you say Vampire? Some people do. From 1932. This came out about the same time that all the early Universal films were coming out. But this is a very different take on the vampire legend, based on the novella called Carmilla. And of course, they tweak the story quite a bit here, but very much like a silent movie, relies mostly on imagery rather than dialogue, and it's very beautiful, very, very strange and beautiful. Vampyr. Okay. Now in this compilation called Legends of Horror, I have one of my favorite vampire movies called Mark of the Vampire from the year 1935, which you can see a little still from there on the back. Bela Lugosi, once again, playing a silent role. He doesn't have any dialogue in the film until the very end. And this is a film that was directed by Todd Browning, who directed Dracula, based on a silent film that he did in 1927 called London After Midnight, starring Lon Chaney Sr. And so he did a sound remake. This was done at MGM. It was not a Universal film. MGM, through a lot of their usual high-tech gloss and glamour and atmosphere, all the money they had, MGM, to make a really good horror film. Unfortunately, it was not a big success, and it probably has more to do with the story than the performances. But Bela Lugosi is very good, and he's matched by a beautiful vampire girl, played by an actress named Carol Borland, who was making her debut in this film. She was very young. She had acted with Bela Lugosi on stage in Dracula in several performances. And she had this long, long black hair, this big moon-like face with just chalk white. Sort of the original image of what a vampire girl looks like in most movies, right? And yeah, it was a very impressive performance by her as well, another silent performance. And unfortunately, because the film was not a hit, and she made her debut in a film that was not a hit, she never made another film, which is very sad. But her image is indelible in the world of horror, classic horror. Okay, excuse me. Getting up to the 1964 Italian film Castle of Blood, sorry, which was originally called La Danza Macabra, and directed by Antonio Margheriti under his pseudonym Anthony Dawson. This stars Barbara Steele, and it is a very strange, again, another very strange take on the vampire legend. about a group of people living in a castle, a group of ghosts living in a castle who are doomed to repeat their deaths once a year on the evening of All Souls Day. Now, it's interesting. All Souls Day is a Catholic, well, it's not a feast day. It's just a special day on which Catholics pray for the souls who are trapped in purgatory. So the people who are trapped in this house they need the blood of the living in order to survive and come back the following year. Just as in purgatory, the people trapped in purgatory need the prayers of the living to be able to leave purgatory. Well, I'm getting all theological here, but it's a very interesting story. Unfortunately, the way it's portrayed, there are a lot of gaps in the story, but it doesn't matter because it's choked with atmosphere. Barbara Steele is really very good in this, okay? And speaking of beautiful Barbara Steele, my next film is Black Sunday, originally known as La Maschera del Demonio back in 1960, and released in America in a slightly different form in 1961. Directed by Mario Bava, who also did the cinematography. It was his first film as a director. The first film that Barbara Steele starred in, although she had been in a few English films prior to this. And she sort of became a horror star. Well, not sort of. She became a horror star and icon overnight in playing a dual role of a witch/vampire who was executed at the beginning of the film and then comes back 200 years later to wreak vengeance on her lookalike descendant. So Barbara is playing an evil role and a sweet role, a good role, and it does it beautifully. And it's still one of the best black and white horror films ever made. So anyway, and finally, coming in at number 1, it will always be the 1931 version of Dracula, starring the great Bela Lugosi, directed by Todd Browning. And this film to me is still magic after all this time. I've had the good fortune to see this on the big screen a couple of times. The last time was it early this year? I think it was early in 2017. I had a chance to see this again, and I'm still mesmerized by it, realizing that the second half of the film is much slower than the first half, which is beautiful and hypnotic. And I've always said that if the film had only been the first, let's say, the first 1/3 of the film where Renfield goes to the castle Dracula, meets Dracula for the first time, and that incredible procession of Dracula down the stairs and those first few words that come out of his mouth, if they had only, that could be a complete film as far as I'm concerned. And I will always love this, okay? And I'm babbling, and this has been almost 13 minutes, so anyway, so that is my list of top 13 vampire films. I think there were 13, I guess, maybe more than 13. So thank you for watching. We've all done these lists before, and I know a lot of my answers have been repeats, but you know, it's kind of good to address these things and do updates every couple of years. So okay, let me know what you think, and once again, happy Friday the 13th. I hope you have better luck than I did.